I love the show, what I've seen of it so far. I mean, it's impossible to second guess. I think I gasped about 10 times just in episode one. Was it a sort of similar experience for you reading the scripts? And did you get all the scripts in one go, or were you kind of left in suspense?
I got the first script 6 weeks after a discussion that we had about the idea that John and Glenn had for the show, which was remarkably fast. I was really kind of taken aback by that. And the fantastic thing about that was that everything that we had discussed and that they had said they wanted to put in the pilot script, they actually did, which is also very unusual. And then I got 2, 3, and 4, certainly before we started production. But then the other scripts came while we were shooting. But that's still a lot of material to have before starting a television show, certainly from my experiences, whether it would be 24 Designated Survivor.
I mean, I interviewed Sarah Michelle Gellar quite recently on her kind of return to supernatural TV, and given her kind of past career choices and characters, she's obviously set a very high bar for herself in that kind of area, meaning every decision she has to take has to be the right one. I just wonder, such as the reputation you've kind of formed for yourself in kind of crime sort of TV series, do you feel quite similarly when returning to the world of that genre? Is having that kind of quality control a good thing?
It's a genre that it's not as complicated as that. I wish it were, but the truth is I love the genre. John and Glenn started talking to me about wanting to do a show that was kind of harken back to the 70s kinds of thrillers like The Parallax View, 3 Days of the Condor, Marathon Man, All the President's Men. Those were the films that I grew up watching. Those were the films that I would watch and kind of fantasize, "Oh, if this works out and I can, if I'm lucky enough to get to work as a professional actor in film, these are the kinds of films that I want to make." And so, their idea of kind of taking the style of the 70s kinds of thriller, but putting it in the middle of a technological revolution, which is what we're in fact going through, I think was a fantastic balance. And they're such beautifully nuanced writers. Another thing that I just loved, and right out of the gate with the first script, was that you have a thriller and it's kind of it moving at 100 miles an hour and it's taking no prisoners, literally, and they've managed to kind of feather in a wicked kind of sarcastic sense of humor with my character and a reluctant love story with Maida Golding's character. So again, it was just beautifully layered. And when you have an opportunity to do material like that, you get excited about doing it. I don't think you think about the consequences. Well, what if it doesn't work? I think you just have to kind of be really focused on your belief that it will and go with that.
I noticed you said in another interview that the show you made was kind of exactly like the show you intended to make. Is that not always the case then? Do you find sometimes they can veer quite far away from what was initially constructed?
Well, yes and no, and I'll use 24 as an example. Howard Gordon, the head writer of 24, would sit down with me at the beginning of a season, and he would kind of pitch me the idea for the show, and invariably, whatever conflict he would be discussing, that would be the end conflict of that season. Instead of it being episode 24, it was always episode 14. So it never landed kind of where we discussed it, and then he would do his creative thing and figure out the last 8 episodes, which is extraordinary. But that's how we worked on that show. And so 24 still was always the show we wanted it to be. It was just they had to come up with more material. In something like Rabbit Hole, I was just very, very surprised that how kind of succinct and specific John and Glenn were, from kind of formulating an idea to the execution of that idea. And that's a gift in itself as well.
So when you sign on to a project like Rabbit Hole, for example, do you have to see things further ahead? Because I mean, 24 lasted years. And so after an experience like that, do you always have to think this could be a commitment that lasts me through a large part of my career? Or would you just have to sign up for one season and just kind of see where it goes?
Well, they won't let you sign up for one season because no one would invest the money in that. No, I think the goal is that you tell a story that's interesting enough and compelling enough that an audience is going to want to see more of it, and that you're going to be excited about making it. So certainly, I didn't know that when I signed up for 24, because that was the first television show that I did, and it was a very new experience, and I got incredibly lucky. Designated Survivor, we made 3 seasons of that. I would have loved to have made more. So the things that I've signed up to do, I have absolutely reconciled with myself that not only is doing 5 or 6 or 10 years a possibility, that's actually the goal. And so it requires a kind of storytelling, and that's from the cast and from the writing staff, that has to be compelling and kind of with an eye towards long term.
When you are on those kind of long-term shows, do you find it difficult in a sense? You can't really do anything about your person. I mean, you have to have the same build, the same haircut pretty much for a few years. I mean, I know, not sure if this would have been up your street, but you can't really grow your hair into a ponytail and grow a long beard. That was kind of out the equation.
Yes, no, it's well, you know what? As you get older, a lot of those options aren't there anymore anyway. And I think it would take me 4 years to grow a ponytail. But yeah, it's if you're doing a show, it makes it a little more complicated, creating some different kind of physicality when you go to do a film if you have a break. And so you start relying kind of more on the internal definitions of character as opposed to the external definitions. And that's interesting for an actor in itself. You pray that it's still interesting for an audience.
Well, I look forward to seeing more of Rabbit Hole in years to come. Thank you so much for your time today, Kiefer. Much appreciated.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, man.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey!